Hey everyone, my name is Agent. Today, I'm going to be reviewing the entire narrative of Destiny 2's last episode, Revenant. This review is going to be broken down into a few sections, which will be marked as chapters. We will start with the Prelude and Prologue, and then progress through all three acts. I'll review each act individually before moving on, and touch up on everything right at the end. Here we go! Our story actually begins back in 2018. During a prison riot in the Reef, an Awoken named Uldren Sov broke out a number of characters, among them being Fikrul the Fanatic. Fikrul was actually gravely wounded sometime before this. Uldren Sov found him and indirectly wished for him to be healed. Riven, the Ahamkara Wish Dragon, fulfilled this wish. The downside? It turned him into an undead fallen who gained the ability to resurrect other dead fallen with Dark Ether, which turned those fallen into the Scorn. Then, the entire Forsaken DLC happened. Fikrul was then chased off and killed by Guardians during a strike. However, every time he dies, he can seemingly revive himself thanks to a wish. So, he went on an annoying monologue about dead things. A bit of a weirdo. Fast forward to Final Shape, Uldren is now a Guardian, and the Witness dies. Right after the Witness dies, primordial light explodes out of the Traveler and shoots off in various directions. The Guardians coin them as echoes, and we're now on a wild goose chase for them. Primordial light is no joke. A few months after the Witness's defeat, we get a distress call from Aramis on Europa. House Salvation is mysteriously being transfigured into Scorn on the fly without being dead. So, we travel to Europa. With the intent of capturing Aramis, of course. As the Guardian progresses through, they discover this new disfigured variant of the Scorn. Fikrul promptly makes his first appearance as Cal of Kells, right after the Guardian teams up with Aramis. He then spawns a new type of Scorn, the Revenant Baron. These Scorn are unique as they have totems that act similarly to the Lucent Ghosts. After a Baron dies, the totem appears and dashes away. If this totem is not destroyed, it respawns the Baron with full health. Aramis then promptly makes a getaway, but is caught up with basically instantly. Crow drops into the field and attempts to reason with Aramis, agreeing to give House Salvation safe passage if Aramis turns herself in quietly, which she does. Right after, back on the helm, Crow literally goes against everything he says and is immediately pointing a gun straight at Aramis. He thinks that there's a House Salvation boarding catch inbound to the helm to reclaim Aramis, but he literally couldn't have been more wrong. Fikrul teleports onto the helm and monologues about how he can turn Elixni into Scorn via the echo that he now has. He then promptly slams the catch into the helm and makes it crash on Europa. Pretty crazy after all these years the helm is finally taken down. After the helm goes down, we're introduced again to Ido in her little corner of the Last City. She has joined the war on drugs on the side of drugs. To be more specific, Ido has a tonic laboratory. The reason why she has a tonic laboratory is to cure Mithrax of his curse, Nezarek's curse, which he seems to have just acquired randomly, but actually dates back to Season of the Plunder. The relics that were being chased were actually the spread remains of Nezarek, and he turned it into tea for Osiris, which cured him, but also gave Mithrax his curse. Ido then tells us she's not close, and she needs our help to find a bunch of tonics and do research for her so she can create a cure. Shortly thereafter, Mithrax crowns us the next Slayer Baron. A Slayer Baron is an Elixni warrior that is appointed to defeat powerful creatures that threaten the safety of Reese. The Slayers were wiped out with the destruction of Reese, obviously, which is why we have never heard of one until now. Slayers use tonics infused with light to their advantage, which is why Ido is offering her services to us. After we are introduced to tonics, we are sent out to collect materials to make them. I will come back to this. After some fieldwork and a bit of onslaught, we catch up with Fikrul. Crow hops in with us and has a little chat with Fikrul. Fikrul is still under the assumption that Crow is Uldren, so Crow tries to play it up and find a way to call Fikrul off. Fikrul is convinced that he and Uldren now get to rule since Fikrul has the Echo. Crow makes his first mistake here, immediately telling Fickrell to call it off without much buildup. Fickrell quickly catches on and realizes that Uldren is no longer, and Crow is who remains. Quote, "You wear his face, you steal his voice, forget his purpose," Fickrell says. He demands for Uldren to return, saying he will, quote, "rip this impostor from your bones," and then he literally runs off without doing anything, which promptly concludes Act 1. So I really don't understand why Nezrek's curse is suddenly so prominent. It seems to have just came out of nowhere, and I don't really like that. Nezrek's curse should have been perpetually built up over the course of however many seasons it took for it to finally become a key plot point. As far as I know, I saw virtually no hints in Mithrax until now. I feel like it was forced in, and it didn't really add much other than making Mithrax crave vengeance and death. The introduction of the Slayer Baron made a lot more sense, however. It felt like a natural progression for the Eliksni storyline, needing to elect a Slayer to take down an evil as large as Fickrell, which leads into my next point. Fickrell being given the ability to turn living tissue into effectively zombies is so much cooler than Dark Ether. It gave us actual stakes, being that literally any Eliksni could just suddenly become Scorn. So, overall, Act 1 was incredibly short. Echoes had 3 weeks of story, while Revenant seems to have only 2 weeks worth. This episode, we got all of the Act story in the first week, which is a change that is now being reverted in the current episode Heresy. I think the reason why it felt shorter was because we had access to the entire Act in one go. But with that being said, let's move on to Act 2. A few weeks later, Mithrax contacts us. He tells us that Fickrell is ferrying prisoners to the Prison of Elders. His curse also appears to be a bit more prominent than before, as he tells us to, quote, "rip the Scorn apart until the air is rich with suffering." Kind of insane. After, Ido gives us a quick pep talk, and we make our way back into the prison. The prison is now renamed to the Tomb of Elders and works similarly but differently to how it did back in Destiny 1. After we enter the tomb, we immediately encounter the Warden's servitor, which we killed during a strike. Varix is unable to override his servitor because the servitor still thinks that they are Varix. Afterwards, we find some stuff within the tomb to upgrade Ido's lab. This gives our tonics a better duration, and the upgrade is intended to help create more potent tonics as Ido continues to work on a solution to cleanse Mithrax of Nezrek's curse. After a bit more busy work around the last city and within the Tomb of Elders, we finally make our way to the Captive Memories mission. During this mission, we follow Fickrell into the tomb while a weird song plays throughout the prison. Once we find the source of the song, we find Fickrell attempting to use his echo on a tomb. When Nezrek tells us to break him, the tomb opens. Varix finally explains what the song is, a dirge. In his words, a seeking song for the lost. The Echo is the one singing the song, and it's looking for a strong wielder. One to lead the Eliksni through, quote, a time of doubt and wrath. The Echo realizes that Fickrell is not the right wielder. At the same time, quote, it demands one who is worthy. After the cutscene ends, we have a quick spar with Skolas. After Skolas is downed, he promptly comes back to life via Fickrell's Echo. This obviously pisses Mithrax off and immediately puts the blame on Varix, which is quite a dick move in my opinion. We return to Ido, who convinces us that we need Aramis now more than ever. Spider gives us a pocket EMP to use on the barrier and her cuffs. Oh, now might be a good time to mention the lawyers and therapists that have gone to Aramis to attempt to quell her inner demons, which she obviously picks up as dark methods to weaken her from the inside out, which is hilarious. I feel bad for the therapist to ask Aramis about her issues. Anyways, the moment we use the EMP, Crow appears out of literally nowhere. I have seen more competent escape attempts from hatchlings, says Aramis. Luckily, Crow is mostly on our side and is willing to back us up. Ikora Hidden obviously already knows, which I thought was a nice detail. Aramis then runs off, and this concludes Act 2. So, I still felt like Act 2 during Revenant was generally shorter than Act 2 during Echoes. But this time stuff actually happens. I was not anticipating Skolas being revived, considering how he just wasn't in the story for quite a long time, literally circa D1. The cutscene that played was also incredibly stunning and had some foreshadowing too. Aramis being released was also predictable, as there was no way that she'd just stay in a jail cell for the entire episode. Crow showing up during the breakout definitely caught me off guard, however. Overall, this act was better, but I don't think it was enough, for me at least. And finally, we arrive at Act 3. After we check in with Aramis via the holoprojector, she lets us know that the echo is similar to Maya Sundaresh's echo. She also tells us that it may be possible to reverse the effects that Fickrell has put upon the Revenant Scorn. Spider then contacts us and lets us know where to find Fickrell. Fickrell has made a fortress in the reef, and we finally narrowed down where it is. We arrive at the Revenant Fortress, and thus begin the exotic mission Kel's Fall. We make our way forward and encounter one of the Barons, the Trickster, seemingly back from the dead after we put her in the ground in 2018. She runs away. We also found a scorned organ, something I will touch on later. We make our way forward and find a mirror which transports us to the literal mirror dimension, which I thought was cool until it led to basically nothing in the mission, sadly. We encounter the Mad Bomber shortly after, who we also quickly dispatch, but then Fickrell revives him anyway. Fickrell goes on another one of his rants, and we continue forward until we encounter the Mindbender. He is also quickly dispatched, but promptly revived by Fickrell. Then, we encounter the Trickster one more time before she is fully killed. After we bust down the gates, we find Fickrell. He promptly runs away. After this, we kill the Hangman. We discover that Fickrell is hiding an apothecary somewhere within the fortress who would be great benefit to us. So, we run the mission back, and we find the apothecary. Her name is Ixis, and she is of Old Reese. She might even be older than Varix, which says a lot about Elixni age. She decides to stay in the apothecary for now, as we will retrieve her later. Let's talk about that Scorn organ. There are multiple codes to be found throughout the entirety of Kel's Fall. Some of them open doors, grant you candy, and enhance the exotic weapon Slayer's Fang. What I find interesting about all this is that it seems to tie back to one of the episode's main pillars, music. I'm not sure why, but one of the pillars during the development of Revenant must have been music. We can play several melodies on it after we complete Kel's Fall for the third time. One of those melodies is Savathun's song. If we play that, she chuckles. What I find even more mysterious about all this is that if you play a specific melody backwards, you are teleported into the final boss room of Forsaken, where you fought the Voice of Riven, and you fight the Scorned Organist. This boss fight seems to just be for the triumph and the fieldwork, but I thought it would be much more impactful. Regardless, we run the Kel's Fall mission one more time. Ido has now given us a syringe that has some sort of anti-dark ether within it. If we hit Fickrell with it, it temporarily turns him back into an Elixni, and that's the opportunity we have to strike and kill him. We do so, the Echo floats up into the air, both Aramis and Mithrax are there, and they take a lunge for it. We are then suddenly teleported inside of the Echo with Aramis. We are shown a vision of Old Reese with the Traveler still above it. The Echo wants to return home, to make Reese whole again. Aramis accepts, but she says she has conditions. The staff then floats to her with a bright white color, and Mithrax gets all upset about it, saying she only knows war. This is the worst part of the story by far, in my opinion. Mithrax then attacks Aramis, but is immediately stopped when Aramis blasts Mithrax with the Echo, cleansing him of Nezarek's curse. What? Why does that work? How does that work? That feels really cheesy and stupid to me. After that, Aramis then just straight up leaves Sol to use the Echo to create a new homeworld, which basically wraps up Act 3. So, obviously, I dislike how they handled Nezarek's curse here. It makes absolutely no sense for it to just be suddenly cleansed like that. It's nice, don't get me wrong, but still makes no sense. Here's what I wish happened. Aramis attempts to cleanse Mithrax, but the Echo isn't strong enough. Ido then shows up and stops Mithrax from attacking Aramis by mercy killing him. Ido killing her own father to prevent Nezarek from overtaking him. it would have been huge character growth and probably would have made this episode a banger. Maybe if they wanted to keep Mithrax in the story, he could just be revived by a ghost or some shit like that. I don't know. I just know that Mithrax being cleansed like that was bad writing. Also, Aramis just fucking off the way that she did wasn't really cool either. She didn't really earn that, considering all the bad she did. I think it would have been better if they kept her around with the Echo being an ally when we needed her. Like, she has some sort of duty to repay before going off on her own adventures. She could have stood her trial and let the humans sentence her for her crimes. Cutscene of Aramis in court would have been interesting. Having the Guardian speak during that trial, saying she isn't as awful as she seems, convincing the court of opinion that she's not an evil genocidal maniac. These stories were not wrapped up properly, and it is kind of upsetting. That's all I've got for you. This is my first time doing something like this for YouTube, so feel free to leave your feedback in the comments if you have any. I really appreciate it, and it helps me a lot when making this sort of thing. And let me know if you want more of this in the future. I might go back and do Echoes if it's worth the time, or I might just skip Echoes and do Heresy by the time that ends. But anyways, thank you so much for watching, and have a good one.